What is going on, students? It's Devlin Cassidy, aka The Scholar, and today I actually have back my second favorite deck ever of all time in Premium. This is unfortunately for some people, and a cheer for others, Megacolony. Yes, this deck is not dead. I talked about this deck in my tier list. This is the Mythiarq Megacolony deck, a deck that has shown a lot of good results at the end of last BCS season. Has had some good results in the singles for the Springfest format. In fact, actually one of my close friends, Logan topped 8 with, I think, this exact list. So that I got from him, and I don't think he's changed it. If he's changed it, well, then I guess I'm late to the party. But I wanted to profile this deck since I had an interview with him, but the audio file got corrupted, and we didn't have time to necessarily reschedule, and it's kind of, past the event now that the season's wrapped up. But I wanted to go ahead and jump straight in to this deck profile because this deck is still so cool, and the fact that, Gredora is at 1, but this deck is still relevant is very, very awesome for me personally as a Megacolony fan, since this is my second favorite clan inside Premium. But enough of me yapping, let's get right into it. So, of course, the first card is 4 copies of Mythiarq Luzurul. This card is really, really powerful as this has a on-place effect, which means it's really good in Premium for any, grade 3 Stoicheia card that has an on-place effect. It's typically always considered, at least for Megacolony, at least just because, our grade 3s are a little bit lacking in that department, but this card's skill is that when it's placed on Vanguard, you can look at the top 7 cards of your deck, and you choose up to 1 grade 3 or less card from among them, and you call it to rear guard. Then at the end of that check timing, Mythiarq will check to see if your board has 5 units. Then if that is the case, after the card is called, you will check, see if you have 5 units on the board, and then your opponent will discard 1 card. So this card is very, very strong, very, very elite, and of course it does have the Persona Ride icon, so within tandem with cards like Megacolony and other things like that, this card is very, very, very good just for the basis of Mythiarq as a whole, just giving you that power and that consistency and that advantage engine that Megacolony doesn't typically have access to. For some utility grade 3s, I still do play 1 copy of Inlet Pulse Dragon. This is just a really good call target off of Gredora, just being able to refund you the soul that Gredora uses, and drawing a card is just very, very strong since this at least is guaranteed the 4th attack on a Gredora turn, and sometimes maybe the 5th, just because if you do have the grade 2, that's very good for this deck, and what I think personally keeps this deck so relevant. Just Inlet Pulse is a good utility card for that reason. And then the last grade 3 unit we play is 1 copy of Death Ward and Antlion. Antlion's still very powerful. Just the fact that you can just, throw a crit on this, and it's like 3 crit, no sentinels, big number. If you neg them a lot with Malegantis, this still threatens a lot. I'm not playing Zoa in my G zone though. I know that early Megacolony Mythiarq list were playing Zoa just because they had access to it, and it's a good kind of cheese win con, but I think in the situations where you're kind of incentivized to use it, there may be a better ultimate stride that we have access to thanks to our deck build necessarily. But Antlion's still just a really good pressure card. Like if your opponent's at 8 cards in hand because you've been grinding them out the entire game, then unfortunately, you can just put them into a kill distance because they have to drop a lot of cards since they cannot guard that with a PG. So that's very, very powerful. And the last grade 3 and the grade 3 slot we play, of course, is Bracing Angel Ladder. Because we only have 1 Gredora, we cannot turn off our opponent's G guards indefinitely. So this becomes our new, in a way, protection, especially for our follow-up and our new kill turn, which I will display here later in the video. I don't want to do a whole combo guide for this deck because this is more so a control deck. There's just some key plays you need to identify rather than outside of, having the entire deck at your disposal. Just having Bracing Angel Ladder there is a lot more helpful. But Bracing Angel Ladder, giving you soul, drawing you a card is very important. Plus, it's a grade 3, so if it ever comes up, it is soul blastable off the Antlion. So just all in all, very strong overall here. Just to be able to protect and insulate our combos is still just very, very powerful. Now to the star of the deck and the card I think that keeps this clan still relevant to this day. This is 4 copies of Mythiarq Guardian Delphina, and this card is absolutely insane. Even though the Mythiarq is not the strongest deck in Standard, this card changes actually functionally how Megacolony operates. And now Megacolony, as long as they see this card, will always be a 4 attack deck. Because at the end of the battle, it's your Vanguard with Mythiarq and its card name attacked a grade 3 or greater unit. So it attacks your opponent's Vanguard. You Soul Blast 1, stand this unit, and it gets 10k until the end of turn. So it gains its own power, and it allows you to have an additional attack every turn, which was really the problem, because after you would finish out your Gredora's last format, and especially before the Mythiarq build, like, you know, became super popular, you never had a way to additionally add pressure once you started going into Tyrannus and to Malegantus and to all these different cards and strides. This card always gives you the 4th attack, especially in the Tyrannus turn, which is now the 2nd stride we kind of lean into the most. And of course, for those that don't know, in Premium, you do absorb the name of your grade 3. So since this has the Mythiarq in its card name, your Vanguard is always going to have the Mythiarq in its card name. For those that don't understand how that works, this is always how you get the 4th attack. But then the even crazier, more bonkers part about this card, and why I think this card is absolutely broken, is because at the end of your turn, if you have 3 or more units with Mythiarq in their card names, and she does count herself, she does not say other, you retire this unit, you choose a card from your drop with Mythiarq in its card name that is not Delphina, and you add it to your hand. Well, very funny considering that this card is Soul Blaster card, so on your Persona Ride turns, you can start looping Persona Rides as you will just, you know, Soul Blast the copy out, put it into your drop, and then you'll just retire her and add the copy back to your hand. It's very, very powerful, very, very strong in a way. Like it's not a loop, but you know, you can just, you know, infinitely recur the Persona Rides. Is just absolutely strong, especially with Malegantus and other cards in the deck. Like just, it stacks up so powerfully. So I just really enjoyed Delphina for that reason, and just as absolutely, you know, kind of set Megacolony in a new direction, as now we really look at the Mythiarq cards for the new sets every time, you know, D series comes out. And even though they're not typically slotted high powerful slots, I know she was originally printed as a promo. She was now reprinted in the festival booster set, so she's very accessible now. You know, kind of docking down this deck's price, which unfortunately there's still a card that gatekeeps people, but it's okay. We'll get to that shortly. Of course, still, I think we're playing the best ride target in the deck still. This is 3 copies of Charming Mutant Sweet Cocktail. This card is absolutely crazy. Of course, like I've covered in all my other profiles, when this unit is rode upon, you can choose one of your opponent's units and you put a cradle marker on it. And I'll just cover the cradle marker right here. The cradle marker is when this unit with a cradle marker is put on it, its power is subtracted from its original power. So it effectively becomes a power 0, and then it has no skills. So you're blanking the unit and its power and its skills. And then when that unit is retired, you get to search your deck for a card that's equal to the grade of the unit that was retired with the cradle marker on it. So if you have like this cradle marker on a unit and then that unit dies for whatever reason, if it's a grade 2, you'll search for a grade 2. If it's a grade 1, you'll search for a grade 1, 0, and so on and so forth. So Sweet Cocktail still gives us access to the cradle mechanic, which was introduced to Megacolony in late V era with the Gredora set. But its more powerful function is the Soul Blast 1 mechanic, which is put on the Guardian Circle or attacks a grade 2 or greater Vanguard from rear guard. Your opponent chooses one of their stood rear guards and retires it. If they don't, your front row gets plus 5k and you draw a card. So this is very, very strong because you can actually give yourself half a defensive trigger on your defensive turns. And so this card just becomes absolutely vital, and sometimes you're just beefing up your defense and allowing you to retain that card quality that you're finally getting with Megacolony and the Mythiarq engine. So she's just really, really good. Unfortunately, we can't max her out at 4. I would really love to if we had space, but we really don't. Like, surprisingly, this deck space is kind of tight. There's like 1 or 2 flex spots maybe, but she just feels really good at 3. You see her from time to time when you need her, so it's absolutely fine in my regards, to be honest. The next grade 3, which was the most random card ever, and I will talk about this card forever. This is our new Garafa. So if you have been a Megacolony fan or have played the past few BCS seasons when Megacolony has been very relevant, you will typically know that we would play a card called Garafa. And Garafa was phenomenal for the grade 2 game because for a counterblast, he would gain a lot of power based on every rested unit and would draw a card. So he was card economy in the grade 2 game, which kind of forced your opponent to ride up, and then you start Gredora locking them out for the rest of the game, which was perfect. But unfortunately, now that we only have 1 Gredora and, you know, we only get really 1 counter charge a turn with our high class Moth, we were forced in a position where we weren't allowed to get enough counterblasts every turn, where the Garafa kind of came as a tax rather than an asset to the deck. So Logan actually put me on this card, as this card is absolutely insane. We needed a way to have a strong grade 2 game without using a counterblast, and preferably not a Soul Blast either, just because Soul is still a resource that we want in this deck that helps us set up for our end kill combo. So this is Steaming Popcorn. So what Steaming Popcorn says is that if your opponent has a card in their G zone, he gets plus 5,000 power, plus 5,000 shield. Mind you, that is not during your turn. So means that both cards are able to actually gain power for these effects during both players' turns. But additionally, if your opponent has a face-up card in their G zone, he gets 10k for each of those stats instead of 5k. So it becomes a 15k shield and a 20k beater, making him a very, very strong card in the grade 2 game, because anything behind a grade 1, if it's an 8k or a 13k, you're asking for 23 or potentially 28, which always hits over defensive crew trigger. This card is very, very strong. Do not sleep on this card, even though it's just a funky looking common from the D series. It's pretty crazy how many D series cards are actually now in Megacolony, as we've already gone through. We've seen so many, but there's still more to come. So let's talk about this, because the last grade 2 in our deck we're playing is one copy of Atrocious Moth Girl Maple. This card, for those that have played before, this card does so much for the deck, actually, even though it's not a multiple copies card. If you see this card, which you typically will most games just because of Mythiarq's check top 7 skill, this card is a free Malagantus fodder, which what I mean by that is that this is a card that will recursively come back, that you can Soul Blast out, that at the start of your turn, you can just kind of look at this card and go, I don't need you. Counterblast one with Mally, shove it to Soul, neg my opponent's Vanguard by 10k. So this card does so much for the deck, to be honest, and I'm just really glad that we have that ability to play Maple to such an extent, just because it just is recursive every turn. And I just really enjoy the free card economy, that once you finally invest in this card will just continually be a resource for you. So this card is absolutely fantastic. Plus it's a 10k base, so like I said, how we have our really good ride target in Cocktail, that if we just want to be a little bit defensive against our fellow like Protect decks or Excel decks, that we can just ride the 10k and then kind of force the triggers to pass too, which is just very, very strong. So I really appreciate Maple for that reason. Moving on to the grade 1s here, we have 4 copies of New Face Mutant Little Dorcas. So I'm playing 4 here just because of the simple fact that you see that we're playing a very low count of grade 1s or grade 3s versus in the past. And you really have to ride Mythiarq or the deck doesn't work. Like your Delphinas aren't live, which is all your value. You're not, being able to consistently Persona ride if you're not on the Mythiarq. So the fear shared between myself and Logan is that you need to see Mythiarq, and how you see Mythiarq is you just play Little Dorcas. Actually, I was even thinking so much to play the Mythiarq that checks the top 5 if you have a different Mythiarq card name, just to find more copies of Mythiarq, the grade 3 Lepazuli. And just Mythichad just doesn't do it because you have to be on a Mythiarq Vanguard already. So it's kind of a neg because where you have to ride the Delphina and you really don't want to do that. So that's why I'm opting not to play Mythichad, but you would just cut a Steaming Popcorn if you wanted to play one copy of Mythichad, which is just really, really important here. But yeah, I love Little Dorcas so much, just being a 13k booster, which behind a Popcorn is an automatic 28k column in the grade 2 game. He's just so strong. Just being able to be those rear guard boosters and just apply that pressure is just such a good ability to have. So I really appreciate having 4 copies of Little Dorcas. The next grade 1, now this is a pseudo / grade 3. This is 3 copies of Mutant Gentleman High Class Moth. I used to be playing this at 4 just before I really valued the consistency that Little Dorcas gives you. High Class Moth just does so much. This card gives you your resource back, and this card just allows you to put Delphinas back to the deck, which is really huge because Delphina's retiring herself every turn. If you're able to put the Delphinas back to deck, you probably should, just that way you keep hitting them off the Mythiarqs. That's just your biggest asset to your deck, and this provides you a countercharge where just shoving a normal unit to the bottom, countercharging at the cost of resting this is very strong. As well as this is a grade 3, so you can actually find it off Little Dorcas, so it's really, really powerful. Really appreciate that we have access to this card, but it's more of it's good to have rather than a deep necessity. But if you find one, then you're effectively fine for the rest of the game, unless you're playing against decks that retire. But there's not too many heavy of those in this format. That gets into those really weird scenarios and really weird matchups that Megacolony doesn't see right now, just because the meta's not shaped up for it. So it's still just pretty fine and pretty safe for that reason. For the next Megacolony card, we're playing 3 copies here of Brilliant Blister. I still kind of have mixed feelings on this card. If you guys tuned into my stream last week, which I'm going to be trying to do a weekly stream on Fridays for those that don't know, I kind of talked about this card a little bit. I don't like the fact that Brilliant Blister is a busted card. And what I mean by that is that Brilliant Blister, don't get me wrong, is an absolutely insane card. It's a card that you can commit to board, that you can return back to hand if your opponent has no stood rear guards, and it also is a forced perma rester. So on a rear guard that's going to swing multiple times, if your opponent doesn't have an activated Angel Ladder or that unit doesn't have resist, then you're able to keep it stood down for the rest of the turn, which is really, really powerful into some matchups like Nova Grappler, like Great Nature, like different decks that just want to restand the same rear guard over and over again and just pound face. He's really good for that. However, good players will know how to play around this card, especially if you've drove checked this, or you've called this and now you've telegraphed that this is in your hand. So it's more of a deterrent than you actually using it for its skill of being able to rest a rear guard. And that's just the more important thing, you know, when I come and scenario with this card. Just so that way, that's how I really just view Brilliant Blister. It's more of a deterrent than you actually using the skill, but it's more so a necessary requirement for you to play it, just because then it forces your opponent sometimes to play awkwardly. So that's kind of my analysis on Brilliant Blister, to be honest, but don't get me wrong, it's a really good card. You still should play it, but maybe if you wanted to be spicy, you could cut a copy, but like I just really like the 10k shield and the 8k deterrent and the free booster. So that's where I'm at with Brilliant Blister. And then the next card here is 3 copies of Mythiarq Re-Rezumi. This card is absolutely nuts because, like Maple, this card recurs itself. What I mean by that, so its ability is act and drop, auto and drop, my bad, when your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Mythiarq in its card name is placed during your ride phase, perform one of the following. If you have no units with the same card name as this card, you may call it to rear guard. If you have a unit with the same card name as this, you can Soul Blast 1 and put this unit on the bottom of your deck and draw a card. But then what's even more crazy is that in the back row center rear guard, this card says that during your turn, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, all your front row units with Mythiarq in their card name get plus 5k. So not only is this recurable like our Maple here, which is absolutely disgusting, but it also now makes our Delphinas base 15k so that they can swing on their own. So like some of my favorite formations here is to have the Delphina in front of the high class moth, where then you'll just rest the high class moth, but she's still at 15. So she can still pressure even over if you have not activated a Mally that turn. So it just makes her so good. And so Mythiarq, the Re-Rezumi is just still so you know, potent. And I really just like the fact that Re-Rezumi is insane. So just free card economy in that way too is just so powerful. Plus it's not a bad discard target because it's recurable off Little Dorcas and things like that. So this card is just overall really beneficial for the deck, and really glad that we get to play it. And then the last grade 1 we play, of course, is Elementaria Sanctity 2. It's just a staple at this point in Premium. Like if your deck isn't playing this, you need to have a pretty good reason as to why not. So I'm just very glad that, you know, we don't have the reason as to why not, because I think that card is broken. Now, this is the gatekeep card of the deck, and I'm so sorry that we have to play this, but it is a mandatory requirement of you playing Mythiarq. That is Neon Geese. Why Neon Geese, you may ask? Well, it's because we're playing a sneaky tech here in the G zone of Meggido, and you cannot stride Meggido and Magellanica because you are a Zoo clan. And by Premium, and I have the chart up on the screen just to kind of show this, is that because you're in a clan identity that is not associated with the OG nations, you cannot play Meggido in your G zone unless you have Neon Geese. But the reason we can stride Meggido with having the Neon Geese in our deck is because the Stoicheia is a unison of Megacolony and Zoo, and so we can play both Xerath dragons, but just whatever your primary clan is, which in this case is Megacolony, would assign us to the Xerath dragon Zoa. But because we play Geese and we play a Stoicheia boss, we can stride into either if we play both. But in this case, we're just playing the Meggido, which I'll cover why we play the Meggido in a little later, but that's why we play the Neon Geese. But thankfully, it doesn't have to be your starter, so you just play the Neon Geese in your main deck. And of course, when you go to Ultimate Stride, you can have a judge or whoever confirm that the card is in your deck if it has not been revealed to a public zone this entire game. For the triggers, playing 4 copies of Bomb Scissor. This card is still absolutely broken. The fact that it's defensive draw and offensive crit is just absolutely insane. You only have the window now of Gredora, though, to push it to Soul to draw a card, which is sometimes what I do still, just because Soul is still important in this deck, even though it's not as a dire resource as it was in prior formats, just because we're only playing the one Gredora. But this card is still just so free, man, and the fact that it's 15k is bonkers. Then I play 4 copies of Riddled Honey, just free stride. Nothing to say here. 3 copies of the Paralyzed Madonna, absolutely broken. Draw PGs. And then I'm still on the 3-1 split. I still just like the resource. Like there's some times where that if you have this card in your hand and you already have a heal and drop, or you have this heal in your hand, you can be a little greedy and a little more offensive with your resources. So I think this is totally fine just to play the 3-1 split. It's not dire that like you're not playing against so many aggro decks this format. Because more of the Loopso should be the prevalent. Which this deck, the reason it's incentivized is because this deck has a phenomenal matchup into a lot of the loop decks this format. And then, of course, the Overtrigger. I still play Blessed Favor. I saw some cheeky builds actually play the yellow OT because it nukes your opponent's board. So then, like, you get the hard win when you start striding Opti, is like they cannot, you know, continuously now just have these rear guards that restand. The fact that you're forcing them now to neg and they're just sitting because they can't attack you and they're only swinging their Vanguard is really, really strong. So maybe you could play the yellow OT. I just like the fact that Blessed Favor heals down. And then, of course, the final goo of the coffin, the V starter here. Dorticus, yeah, man, just so cool. Onto the G Zone here, of course, playing the Harmonic Society. You got to play this card. I don't know how many times I have to go over in my profile. Card's broken, gives you a free 20k shield because 9 times out of 10 you're gonna choose to go second with his decks, just so that way you can threaten Gredora first stride, which makes a lot of decks uncomfortable this format. So speaking of the big bad Boogie Queen herself, or the Boogie Woman, or whatever we want to call her. The fact that she's still legal, man. Still sick. Wish she was still at 2, though. This is like one of my favorite strides ever printed. I know I sound like a masochist when I say that, but I think the card design is just very interesting. Just because they gave the strongest defensive skill in the game of your opponent doesn't stand. They can only call from hand is broken. Also, the fact though that she gives you the offense to it, but when you swing, you Soul Blast 1, search your deck for a grade 3, and you call it to rear, and it gets plus 10k, which is absolutely broken on Persona Right turns. Like if you've had to go double Mally your first stride or something different your first stride, and then you go into her on a Persona Right, like the fact that that rear guard 9 times out of 10 is Inlet Pulse, and that's a free 33k beater is disgusting. So Gredora is just so good for that reason. But let's go into her skill though, like really deep dive for those that haven't encountered her. She is Act Counterblast 1, you flip up anything in your G zone, and then your opponent is restricted to, until the end of their turn, they can only call cards from their hand, and none of their units stand during the stand phase. So even if you stride, your Vanguard is still rested. You have to ride to restand your Vanguard. That's very important, but like I said, then when she swings, she gets to call the grade 3. So very, very strong card here for sure. Now, I've talked about this card a lot in this video. We're now up to 3 Maligantus. This card is very interesting as it's more in here as like a threat that you can have 3 face up. So your opponent has to be very cognizant of like when playing into you about how many times to give you a window to kind of stride into something that flips. 9 times out of 10, this is your flip fodder with Gredora, unless you're in those loop matchups where then you can start just giving yourself the damage to play the Obtis and things like that, which then you would flip Harmonix Messiah in that case. But this card allows you to, when it is face up in the G zone, you counterblast 1 and you choose your rear guard and you shove it to Soul. So like I said, the free card economy from Rirazumi to shove it to Soul and from Maple to shove it to Soul is just free value that if you Soul Blast those cards out, then you can use them for him again the following turn. And then you choose one of your opponent's stood rear guards and you retire it. And if you retired it, you countercharge 1 and draw a card. So then his effect from the G zone becomes free. Additionally, though, if you did not retire, so if all of your opponent's rear guards were rested or they could not be chosen, you neg your opponent's Vanguard by 10,000 power, which is ridiculous because now they've gone from like an 11k to a 1k or a 3k to or a 13k to a 3k, and you can do this in multiples, meaning that your opponent's Vanguard can go negative. So this card is just very, very strong. Allows you to apply numbers without going very high because you're doing the pseudo I gain 10k by negging you 10k, which is really, really powerful. So Mally's here for that reason, but he's also, his skill is free when he's on the Vanguard circle. Your cost is literally just flipping up a card from your G zone, which in this case, most times when you do stride Mally, you'll be flipping up another Maligantus. So this card is absolutely ridiculous, and I love this card so much. Plus, it has actually one of my more favorite arts in Megacolony. Just he looks so super imposing with that, so I just absolutely love him. He's so sick. Now, another card I've been talking about a lot in this video, I got 3 copies of Lawless Mutant Deity Obturandus. I really highly recommend you guys playing 3. I've seen a lot of builds playing 2. I think Logan is right when you say that you need to be playing 3, just because then you force a grind game, and most people only really expect the 2. When you kind of, get into these situations, especially against Grand Blue or some of the more fair decks, the fact that you can just lock them out for essentially, 4 turns again with Gredora, if you're just being smart about managing your resources, the game will typically be over after the 3rd one, if not before these 2, just because some decks just can't keep up without doing anything. And most of the time, a lot of decks, their rear guards give them advantage and resource back. So this card is really strong, but this card is always not your first stride because this card is a GB2 skill, meaning that you have to have at least a face-up card in the G zone and him on the Vanguard circle when you activate the skill. But his cost is CB2, discard a card. He does not flip, so meaning that you're never getting a Mally off this card, which is in a way fair, but your opponent cannot call cards to rear guards, period. Like, you cannot get anything on the rear guard circle. So everything restands, but if your opponent doesn't have a board, like if they have an empty rear guard, like if you're playing against Tachikaze or something like that, or like Great Nature or anything that like retires their entire board, well, then you're out of luck because now you can't call to rear guard the following turn until the end of your next turn. So absolutely super strong card. We love Optyrannus for that reason, and we love Optyrannus too because, of course, he absorbs the name, so you still get 4 attacks with Delphina while on this card. So just absolutely broken. Very strong for that reason. The next stride is Overwhelm. This is another like utility stride. This card would just be a counterblast 1, flip anything face up in your G zone. You draw for the number of rested units your opponent has, and if it was 1 or less, or it was rested rear guards, right? Yep, rested rear guards, and if it was 1 or less, you get a drive +1 and a crit +1. And then she has a GB3 Dark Device, which says that all of your units get +2k for each face down card in your opponent's damage zone, so you can kind of buff up your field a little bit. This card like rarely ever comes up. Like, this kind of comes up in the mirror and in the control matchups, but that's really it. Like, Overwhelm's here. Like, there's most games you aren't striding this card, but like if you know your matchups and everything, you know when this card is appropriate. So that's what I'll say to that extent. I can't give you like, oh, you're guaranteeing to go Overwhelm every game. No, I'm never gonna say that to you, just because that card has been a meme forever, and that's a meme with me personally. If like TJ, Logan, everybody's watching this video, they know that Overwhelm is a meme with me. But then we play the GB8, which is Suppression Mutant Deity Tyrantus. So we have Obtyrannus. Yeah, we have Obtyrannus and then Tyrantus. That's pretty sick. I just realized that just now. But this is a GB8 that says all of your opponent's vanguards and rear guards lose their auto abilities and they cannot intercept. And then all of your whole entire board gets +5k. For each of your opponent's rested vanguards and rear guards. So if they have like a full board, if for whatever reason you just stride this, they have at least like 5 units rested, then your whole board is getting +25k, which is absolutely broken, especially off Persona Ride. Then your front row is like 35k minimum. And so yeah, he's just sometimes an auto win button if the grind game winds up there. And then the last card here is Meggido for our strides. This card is ridiculous. This card is actually so disgusting. I really like Meggido a lot. This card, of course, is when it's placed, Counterblast 2. You choose up to 5 units from your hand and or drop, and you call them to rear guard, and they get 5k, and then they get the ability at the end of the battle they attack. You choose a rear guard, and you swap positions with the unit. Now, why is that broken, you may ask, in this deck? And why has Soul mattered? Now, if you are not recycling back your Delphinas, this is what the deck can do. If you stride Meggido, and of course you would probably have Persona Road on this turn, and you revive the Meggido, and let's say you just revive for the little giggles the homie, right? And you have 4 cards in Soul. So let's just say we put all of the Bomb Scissors to Soul, right? So we've Persona Road, we have 4 cards in Soul, and of course we'll be on the Mythiarq Lazulu for the Vanguard. So let's just say that this is our board, right? We've given everything +5k on the board, and then now the Rirezumi is of course giving +5k to the front row Mythiarqs, which is always going to be perpetually checking when we swap. So you'll swing Delphina here. Delphina will be 25 base if you've done Mally, because you can activate Mally in this position. Just save the Rirezumi in your hand. You can just call 1 or 2, pay 1 or 2 CB, neg your opponent even more, make this turn more oppressive, because then you'll just swing 25, swap, swing 25, swap, swing 25, swap, swing 25. Do not swap the Rirezumi just because you want the power here. And then what you'll do is you will swing Meggido, you'll do your drive checks, and then at the end of battle, you will Soul Blast 4 and restand all of these Delphinas, and they get +10k. So now there are 35s on the front row, and you'll swing 35, swap 35, swap 35, swap 35, swap, and then this will just be 18, but it's still you just give the triggers there, just so that way you can follow it up with like a 28 or a 38 or actually, yeah, because most of the time that once this is here, you have not like done Mally, unless you're going to keep the Mally there, then like whatever, if you just have the 2 CB. But this card is like your really random auto button. When this deck concept was introduced to me, I thought this like was absolutely like beyond nasty, that the Delphina can just do that, that you can get like a 9 attack turn and 9-10 attack turn in Megacolony is absolutely insane. So yeah, Megacolony has access to this for those that didn't know. Just because again though, you do have to play the Neon Geese in your main deck to actually be able to do that. Just so that way you can actually appropriately stride Neon Geese. But yeah, the absolutely insane concept that Megacolony has access to. For the finale here, we're just playing 2 copies of Crew Weeble. This card's still, I think, like the best G-Guard in Megacolony. The fact that you get to Soul Blast 1, and this unit automatically gets 30k shield, and then your opponent has to rest rear guards in order to minus it 10k for each, is absolutely busted. So free 45k shield, unless your opponent wants to, start minusing attacks or boosters. Very, very strong for that reason. 1 copy of Relish Lady. Again, just free resource, just being able to draw a card, countercharge, soul charge if your opponent doesn't rest 2 units when their Vanguard swings is good. Again, being able to get your resource back, so that way you can be, a little more greedy if your hand is appropriately set up for it. And then 1 copy of Gristfort here, strong into some decks, again, just being able to forcibly rest the back row when your opponent's Vanguard swings for a counterblast. It comes up sometimes, not a lot, but again, this card most of the time is your flip fodder off Relish Lady, but this card still does sometimes come up in some matchups. And then the final one here is just the free 25k shield in Morphosion. But yeah, and of course, because we aren't playing anything with Protect outside of Hell Demise, you don't really need a Protect marker. I would just include one just in case, something bad happens. But yeah, most of the time you just find your Mythiarq and you cruise. But yeah, that, my friends, is going to be the deck. And I know that I've done a lot more editing and stuff on this video. I'm going to try to make my my deck profiles a little more high quality, just because that's what I want for the channel and stuff like that. So please let me know that if you enjoyed kind of, this style a little more, as it's greatly appreciated, as we are getting really close to 1,700 subscribers. The journey has been absolutely awesome. I really appreciate everyone that's taken the time to click the subscribe button. If you have not, I highly encourage you to do, as I will keep bringing you guys the highest level of Vanguard quality content that I can produce, especially for the premium format. So I really encourage you guys to like and subscribe if you have not already, and make sure you check out some of my lovely sponsors up here. I know that Dueling Guard just released their new Demon Slayer related collection, so they have all these pre-orders up for sale and to pre-order, so that way you can lock in and show off some of your favorite breathing styles with these new sets. And so I really encourage for you to go shop with my affiliate code. You can save some money off on your pre-order. So quick shameless plug there, since that was pretty recent. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. I really appreciate everything. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful rest of your week. I love you all. God bless and take care.